Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Emerging Brands with Kelly Bennett Podcast. I have a very special guest, someone who I've been following online and love what they're building and how they're building it. Shana Rehwald, founder of Me is Me, is on the podcast today. And Shana, I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be chatting with you today.
Yay. So let's just jump into it for anyone who's new to your world, who is really curious about what you're doing and building. What is the story behind your brand? How did this all happen?
Yeah. Okay. So, like most of us, I became an accidental entrepreneur.
Love it.
I actually built my career working for startups and emerging brands. Yeah. So,
Cool.
I was working in social media and doing marketing for about a decade. And in February of 2020, I got really burnt out working in corporate social. And, it's the wild, wild west out there. So I was ready for a change. I really wanted to move into events. And so I quit my job and started applying to event roles. Well, it turns out 1 month later, the pandemic hit and event roles were completely off the table.
Yes.
Insane. And so right around that same time, well, at that point I was like, I can't go back to social media. I don't know what I'm doing with events. And right around that same time, I was already in the midst of a divorce with my ex-husband, and he was my partner for over a decade. So suddenly the two things I identified with most, my career and my marriage, had shifted, and I just had no clue kind of what to do next.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a wild time. We're in this pandemic, all of these things that I've identified with, like everyone, all the things that we all identified with got stripped away. And for me, it was just like times three.
So you cleaned house, literally, figuratively, like
Yeah.
hard restart, like we're doing this whole thing over.
Yeah, I definitely hit hard reset or hard restart
Yeah.
on my life. It was very wild, but I decided to join this women's group online with this community called Yellow Co. They're all about women creating
Hmm.
meaningful work. And when I joined this group, I was like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. But the one thing I do know is that it's my life motto to be the meest me. That means to show up as the most authentic version of me in every situation and give you the space to show up that way too, including you here today, Kelly, everyone here listening.
Yes.
And so one of the women in the group said, hey, Shauna, someone like you could really help someone like me. I have really bad imposter syndrome. Have you ever thought about doing some sort of programming around that? And I responded and I was like, no, I've never thought about that. What would that even look like? And so I ended up during the midst of getting separated and then getting divorced, I took myself on a big self-discovery journey. I met my ex-husband when I was 20 years old. And so we really grew together, and he was really a big part of my identity. And so I had to really rediscover myself. So I ended up revisiting a lot of the tools that helped me when I really needed them, and I decided to put them into a journal, and I launched the Mia's Me journal in March of 2021.
Wow. Talk about a me is me moment, story, all the things. So when you were making the journal, how did that part come about?
Yeah. So okay, so during the time that I was separated, I was seeing, and when we were working on things, I was seeing two different therapists. I was listening to all of the Esther Perel, like really trying to figure out the relationship part of things. And I was just journaling a ton. I was finding all of these different prompts online, on Instagram, different friends were giving me recommendations. And so I truly did look back at the things that really helped me. And I actually reached out to a friend that was in the guidance group, my Yellow Coat guidance group, and asked her to help me bring the journal to life. So I had originally designed it in Canva and was like, okay, if I'm going to do this thing, I need to hire a graphic designer. I am not a graphic designer. And so one of the women in the group, Hannah Schneider, she came on and she helped me bring my idea to life.
That is so cool. And as someone who's like an avid journaler myself, I really respect that you did the journal because it's not an easy product to produce.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of attention to detail. And so I really admire how you've created it and how you've been building it. So you brought on a graphic designer to bring it to life. So, how did you start selling it? How did you start launching it? Because again, I think that is a really cool part of the story, too.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I had to relearn an entirely new industry. I didn't know anything
Right.
about the paper, the stationery industry. That was a whole different world. So, I just started by cold emailing printers and taking meetings and learning about the language surrounding the printing industry, the paper weights, like the different just like the different words that they use to describe things, and started getting a feel for what I wanted. Started doing research, taking calls with different people who had created their own journals and magazines, and just started learning more about that space. And I'm really, I worked with a few different printers. It took me a minute to kind of figure it out, but I'm so grateful for the printer I have now. But I can tell you a little bit more about that later, but yeah, so once I found a printer that I really liked, they helped me create and kind of bring this to life physically, print it for me. They're a family owned printer in California, and
Love that.
yeah, and so they helped me print it, and I was like, "All right, I'm gonna start by." I was like, "I just need to get this thing out." I had this inner knowing. I knew that this was gonna be part of something bigger. I didn't know what it was gonna look like, but I was like, "I just need to get this out there." And
Right.
so I soft launched to friends first, and then I shared about it. And through my work, I'd done a ton of influencer marketing, and so
Okay.
did so much gifting when I launched, Kelly, like so much gifting. I gifted it to friends that were influencers and people that were influencers or creators online, and to editors, and I was just trying to give it away to as many people as I could who really resonated with it.
Yeah. I think that's such a powerful step of getting that brand awareness and something really practical and tangible that someone listening to this is like, okay, that's part of it, of getting the word out and really being your own biggest cheerleader of being like, hey, I feel like you would really dig this. Can I send it to you? And so I love that you just shared that because I think that's again something that could be often overlooked of like a really practical step of getting your product out there. So I
Yeah.
love that.
Thank you. So I've just sent a lot of cold emails, a lot of cold DMs. Obviously, I did not get yeses to all of them. There were a lot of no's, a lot of no responses. Someone even told me that they felt like the workbook felt like homework. And I was like, well, this isn't for you then, obviously.
Right.
But yeah, I was really excited about it and knew that the people who would get it. I knew the people who would resonate it with it would understand what I was doing.
And so that was in 2021.
That was in 2021. Yeah.
Amazing. So now to 2023, what's the state of the brand? What are you working on now? What's the new vision of what you want to grow with it? I would love to hear that.
Yeah. So when I launched, I didn't quite know where it was headed, but I had some ideas about it. I eventually want to launch more journals down the line.
Love
Um,
it.
so my first year, I really started by getting the word out about the journal. The second year, I really started leaning more into sharing my story. I learned that when I share my story, I think it's pretty relatable. And I learned that people need to hear it sometimes. Some people do really need to hear it. So I started sharing more about my story, being a little bit more vulnerable, and started offering digital and in-person workshops. I learned that people were buying the journal to do together with their partner or with their group of friends. I was like, oh, I should create a container for this and create some sort of community around this so people can have time and space to reconnect with themselves.
Love that so much.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So I love that up so much. And I think that's a really cool way of building an emerging brand. by cultivating that community and, like what you just said, creating that container for a product, but having that community around it and really guiding people through that. So that huge fan of that style of building a brand. And what was the feedback that you got now hosting these gatherings and leading people through it? What's the feedback you've been getting?
The feedback has been amazing. I okay, so I work part-time at UT Austin at the Kendra Scott Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership Institute, and the students have a book club every semester, and they choose a book that they want to deep dive into. Last semester they chose Kendra Scott's book Born to Shine, and in this past semester they chose the Mia Smee Journal. So
Wow.
yeah, I know. So incredible. So I got to walk the KSWELI is the shortened name for it. I got to walk the KSWELI student board and student council through a series of workshops where we got to dive into prompts from the Mia Smee Journal, dive into discussions about it, and it was incredible. I wish I had access to these kinds of resources when I was their age.
That is such a cool story also of the brand of having university students go through the prompts. And I agree. I wish I had some direction on who the hell I was and what did that all mean while I was in college. So that is such a cool full circle moment too, that you're able to give back in that way and also get real-time feedback
Yeah.
on your journal as well.
Yeah, so it has been amazing. I'm now moving also into corporate wellness and offering workshops as well. It's been really amazing to see the way that my journal resonates with different audiences. There's a lot of companies that reach out to me to buy a journal for every one of their employees. And
Oh,
it's yeah, corporate gifting is an avenue that I didn't consider when I launched this, but it's pretty incredible.
something that I want to ask you, because you're bringing up a really good point of getting started, not exactly sure where it's going to go, but it sounds like you're really seeing, okay, things are you didn't even think about it while you're started, like corporate gifting. Okay, cool, that's something. What's helping you navigate what is a yes, what is a no, what something that you would, think about testing or experimenting with? Like, what is that North Star for you?
It all comes back to trusting my inner knowing, trusting that gut
Mm.
feeling, my intuition. It is through reconnecting with myself that I have gotten really clear on the things that raise my energy, the things that drain me, the things that feel
Mm.
aligned, and the things that don't. And so now I can tap into my inner knowing when I'm making a decision about something and really come from a place of like, oh, okay, this feels good. I want to do more of this, or maybe this doesn't feel quite right. So, for example, there have been people that have reached out to collaborate or partner with me as me, and maybe it would have been a great financial gain for the business, but at the end of the day, I really want to build an intentional brand. And if they don't feel brand aligned, then it's a no, unfortunately. But I've learned that often when you say no to things that aren't aligned, something that is aligned is really right around the corner.
That is such a good reminder that I think so many people starting out are fearful of saying no to something because they're just so anxious to get a yes. So when they have a yes, but they're not really super into it, they just feel guilty about saying no. And I know that when I first started over a decade ago, I definitely went through that. So I really love that you just said that when you do say no to something that just doesn't feel right, most likely something that's even better is waiting for you.
Yeah, and I've literally seen it happen to me. It's been amazing.
I love it. And so what is the ideal person to pick up a Me As Me journal?
The ideal person is anyone who is going through a transition. So
Okay.
anyone who is going through a breakup, going through a divorce, maybe they just moved to a new city, maybe they just quit their job or just started a new job. Maybe they're pregnant and trying to cope with this new body and new transition that's happening for them. But also really anyone that's ready to do the inner work, anyone that's like, you know what, the past few years have been so wild. I need to sit down and figure out what I want for my life.
I love that. And it resonates with me too. I think that it's a good check in of even after all of us went through so many life changes the last few years. And it sounds like something that would be a really good check in. Like, okay, the dust is kind of starting to settle. We're getting a sense of what our new reality is. Like, what do you really want to build moving forward?
Yes. So I think it's great for anyone in a transition, but it's also great for anyone who just wants to do that check-in.
Yeah, I love that. So, where can someone find the journal? How can someone join one of the groups? Like, walk us through all of that.
Okay, so I sell the Me journal on my website, miasme.com. But I also sell the journal all over the US. So it's sold at a museum, a contemporary art museum in Oklahoma, which is
Cool.
cool. A hotel lobby shop here in Austin. There's a wine shop here in Austin that sells it, and just all kinds of boutiques all over the country.
That is so cool. Before I let you go, because I know so many people also listening, like what you just said is their goal. Do you have any advice for someone who's just starting out to even get their products in cool shops like that?
Yeah. I am all about a cold email. I
Okay.
send so many cold emails, and sometimes people won't respond. Sometimes you'll get a no, but you just have to keep going. And know that the people that get it will resonate with what you're doing, and they're your people. I also think it comes back to paying attention to what feels aligned. So is it a
Hmm.
fuck yes or a no? I think
Yeah.
that is such a good question to come back to. Really tuning in and feeling into what makes the most sense for your brand as you're building it. Um,
Hmm.
but also, it's important to keep learning. I follow so many entrepreneurs on Instagram, people that are in my industry and not in my industry, listen to so many different podcasts. And I'm always just trying to see what's out there, see what other brands are doing. And that really helps me as well.
I love that. And one last question, because I know this is definitely going to pop up in someone's mind. Any tips about the cold email? Because I know that so many people are intimidated by that.
I think don't say too much. A
Okay.
lot of people, some people will write their whole life story in an email or say a little bit too much. And we have to remember that we all get too many fucking emails. We all
Yeah.
get so many emails. So if you could be short and sweet and to the point, you can continue that conversation. I also think if you do want to share a lot, you can have the first half of the email be really short and to the point and say, feel free, like see below for a little bit more info. And then after you sign off, you can share that blurb at the bottom.
Love that. That's a really good practical tip as far as keeping it short, sweet, to the point, link to your website or to wholesale, but really not making it a whole life story in an email, quick to the point so you could get an answer back.
Yeah. And you may not get an answer back. And if not, follow up in a week.
Love that too. That's something that I really encourage so many emerging brand founders. I'm like, follow up.
Yeah,
Just because
follow
you
up.
haven't heard back, it's okay. Like people are busy, make their life easier and bop that email back to the top of their inbox and follow up.
And you can also find them on Instagram and DM them.
Yeah.
Don't underestimate the power of a DM.
Yes, I DM'd you to come on to this podcast.
Truly, it
I
works so well.
I am a big advocate of slipping into the DMs if you think that someone aligns with you and you want to talk with them or connect with them. One of my favorite ways is having a podcast so I could talk to really cool, interesting people like yourself and be like, hey, I would love to know your story. And it's just a fun way to connect with people. And it's sending a DM. The worst that happens is someone doesn't get back to you. But best case scenario, you get to have cool conversations with interesting people you want to connect with.
Yeah. And, everyone is on Instagram. You can literally
Yes.
DM anyone in the freaking world. It is crazy the access that we have these days.
Yes.
They may not necessarily see it, but the fact that you could actually message someone, it always blows my mind.
Same. Same. I love this conversation. I feel genuinely like inspired and encouraged to keep building what I'm building. And I'm sure there's going to be so many founders who needed to hear this to keep going, right? On the days where it's like, what the hell am I doing? What am I building? Where is this all going? I think this will be such a great episode to replay and re-listen to check back with yourself, with your own intuition, to do the inner work so that you can build what you really want.
Yes, I think building an intentional brand that feels aligned with your me,
Mm,
that's the end game.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on. Everyone, go check out Mia's Me journal. I will link everything in the show notes. And thank you, Shana, for coming on. This was a really awesome, awesome conversation. And I appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome. And I'll see everyone on the next episode.